Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammadan Ashraf al-Anbiya wa Sayyid al-Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah khair everyone for coming. May Allah bless you and your families inshallah, all the attendees. Also, I'd like to thank all the organizers, the volunteers, specifically the Mihraab core team. And a special thanks to Brother Shan Deen, alhamdulillah, who actually was the emir of this whole program. May Allah bless him and his family, as well as all of you. Barakallahu feekum. Welcome to the Mihraab annual conference of leaving a legacy, alhamdulillah, in obviously Bellevue College. So, alhamdulillah, this title is called Leaving a Legacy, and the talk I'm talking about, inshallah, today is about leaving a legacy of knowledge, inheriting from our forefathers or our scholars, and also passing on that tradition to our heirs that come after us. So alhamdulillah, what does leaving a legacy mean? It means leaving a legacy in the akhirah. The question is not so much what have we done in the dunya and what have we taken from it. The question is what have we left behind in the life of this world. What is it that is left for the ummah, for Islam, for our communities, for our children, for our children's children? That is the big question. What kind of life have we lived? Is it a life of halal and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, leaving that tradition and that legacy behind? Or is it a life of disobedience and haram that we've left behind in the dunya? Which one is left after we're gone? Because the reality is all of us will die. That is a reality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَكُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَاقَةَ الْمَوْتِ. Every soul shall taste death. That is a fact. The question is, when we taste death, is there going to be something left behind that is positive, or is there going to be something left behind that is negative? Right? So that's the big question we're going to ask in this conference. So this is the legacy we want to leave. Another question is not what we have also left here for in terms of material wealth and gain for our children and youth, but what have we sent forward to the akhirah? What's waiting for us in Jannah? This is the spiritual bank account. You know, you have your bank account where you deposit wealth, and the more you put in, the more you can take out later. You know, some people have, alhamdulillah, halal type of accruement of wealth, or things that will increase their financial status. We also have the same concept in Islam. The more you deposit from good deeds and good actions and good character and good mannerism and knowledge itself into the halal bank account, the more you can withdraw in the akhirah. And this halal bank account accrues halal interest. And you have 10 to 700 times, وَاللَّهُ يُضَاعِفُ مَن يَشَاءُ. Allah will increase however He wants and as much as He wants. And that amount is waiting for you in Jannah. So that's the kind of legacy we want for us and for our communities and our families. And that's what this whole conference is about. So alhamdulillah, I want to talk about knowledge, the concept called ilm. And in Islam, this is super important, seeking sacred knowledge in our religion. And so what is a requirement of ilm? First, you must have a niyyah, a sincere intention to seek knowledge for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالِ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَلِكُلِّ إِمْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَىٰ. For every person is that which he or she intended, and you will get exactly what you intended. And actions are based upon intentions, and for every individual is that which he or she intended. So this is a first precondition to seek knowledge. A precondition of niyyah is Islam. That you first have Islam. And you have to have sidq to have Islam, truthfulness, to have the religion, and then have a sincere intention, and then seek knowledge, and then follow up the knowledge with amal, actions and good deeds. Because knowledge without, or action without knowledge is null. Knowledge itself, action itself requires knowledge, and then after action, the fruit of that is khashya, it is fear of Allah, obedience of Allah, and the fruit or the result of khashya is Jannah. So you see the whole process. First we have sincerity, we're truthful, we have Islam, we seek knowledge, we have a righteous intention, we seek knowledge, this bequeaths khashya, and this results in Jannah. That is a process, and obviously the condition throughout the whole process is ikhlas. Sincerity for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what is ikhlas? It is defined by our scholars, أَن تَعْمَلْ لِلْوَجْهِ اللَّهِ الْكَرِيمِ, that you act and you work for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. That's ikhlas. And that must be there in the Islam, in the intention, in the knowledge, and in the action, and inshallah will be a result in Jannah. So alhamdulillah, that's a process of seeking knowledge. So I want to define what knowledge is by the scholars. The scholars, they say, al-ilm idrakun jazimun. So they say what? Al-idrak al-jazimun mutabiqin lil-waqi'. It is a certain realization that is in accordance with reality. That is knowledge. So if we look at that definition outwardly, we also know that knowledge itself is what? It's power, it's authority. How else would we know halal and haram? What is right, what is wrong? And unless you have that prerequisite of knowledge itself. And we understand knowledge not to be information, solely something that we just memorize and gain and not acted upon. Some of us are in college and we take secular sciences and so forth, and we learn mathematics and engineering and law and medicine. This is good. This is fard kifaya. It's a communal obligation. But this is more information to fulfill a specific function. Ilm is something that is designed to make you a better human being, to spiritually enhance you, to bring you closer to your Creator, to make you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to love you. The basis of knowledge is action itself, right? So that's what we're talking about here in terms of knowledge and not just information, because it's something acted upon. It's not a terabyte, it's not a screen, it's not a hard drive, it's not Shaykh Google, Maulana Bing, Mufti Facebook, Hafiz Saab Twitter. It's not these things, right? Knowledge is much greater than just information, because you can teach a parrot to regurgitate or to regurgitate or repeat information. You can just record this lecture and say, mashallah, the actual recorder knows more than me. But the reality is your recorder and parrot is not going to act upon that knowledge. And that's the difference between you as a Muslim and between an animal or a recorder. So alhamdulillah, the scholars, they say, al-ilm bila amal ka-shajara bila thamar, that knowledge without action is like a tree without fruit. It doesn't produce anything beneficial itself. So what is the reality of knowledge? Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, لَيْسَ الْعِلْمْ كَثْرَةَ الرُّوَايَةِ وَلَكِنْ الْعِلْمْ نُورٌ قَذَفَ اللَّهُ فِي قَلْبِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. Imam Malik, he defines knowledge not as a lot of rawaya, narrations, memorize, mashallah, you memorize some ayat. You know, some people say my smartphone's a hafiz. I'm not, but my smartphone is, right? So it's not so much that you memorize a lot of information. Yeah, knowledge is a light that Allah casts in the heart of the believer, according to Imam Malik. That's the reality of that science. And it's something that is in the chest of men and women, that's passed down from generation to generation. We see the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not a book. He was not a radio. He was not a computer screen. He wasn't a picture. He was a human being. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the greatest man who ever walked on the face of the earth, the greatest of all creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the master of mankind. He himself passed down that knowledge from Jibreel alayhi salam, who was his first teacher, the revelation he received from the Quran, and then he passed that on to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and then future generations after that. So what do we notice? It's from teacher to student, father or mother to son or daughter, and so on, person to person, heart to heart, from the beginning of Islam all the way till our time today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran, بَلْ هُوَ آيَاتٌ فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ وَمَا يَجْحَدُ بِآيَاتِنَا إِلَّا ظَالِمُونَ. Allah says, rather this is signs in the chest of men and women who have been given knowledge. وَمَا يَجْحَدُ بِآيَاتِنَا إِلَّا ظَالِمُونَ. And nobody denies our signs except the oppressors. So this actual knowledge is in the hearts and in the chest and passed on to future generations. Some of the scholars, they say, or some of the poets, they say, كَانَ الْعِلْمُ فِي صُدُورٍ ثُمَّ انْتَقَلَ إِلَى السُّطُورِ. That knowledge was in the hearts and chest of men and women, and then it transferred over to pens or to books and scriptures and pens and so forth. So we see this, alhamdulillah. One thing that you will see today in Mauritania, if you go there, you'll see actually some students who are children who've memorized the entire Quran from their teacher, because they use the law, the board, they write it down, they memorize it, and then they erase it, and then they write it down again. This is a methodology of memorizing Quran, but they've never seen a mushaf. Nothing actually called a book called the Quran. So how did they memorize the Quran then? Well, their teacher memorized it from his teacher, from his teacher, from his teacher, from his teacher, back to the Sahaba, back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, back to Jibreel alayhi salam, back to Allah. You see the process? That's how revelation came to us. From Allah to the Jibreel alayhi salam, the first teacher, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba, tabi'un, all the way to our day today. We have to reconnect to that chain of transmission called Senate. back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We connect to scholars and teachers who connected to scholars and teachers, all the way back to Sahaba, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Jibreel, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is so essential, because understanding and interpretation without sanad is going to be extreme. It's going to be a misunderstanding and misinterpretation of our religion. Today we see extremists, Al-Qaeda and ISIS and so forth. We see extremists in the world. What are they missing? One, rahmah, mercy of our religion, love of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the love of Islam, but also they're missing sanad. Because if we don't have that proper understanding and chain back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's going to result in extremism that will cause us to what? Cherry pick verses and ayat and hadith, what we like, what we want, and then come with our own conclusions and our own version of Islam. So this is why it's absolutely essential. As one scholar said, you have a train, so you have the engine in the front, and then you have the caboose all the way in the back, and there's a chain link from one end to the other, and they're all pulled by the engine. And as long as you connect to that chain link, then you will also move with the engine. And so the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the engine. And we are the box carts in the back. So if we just connect to this chain, inshallah, he will pull us in the right direction and understanding of Islam. But if we're disconnected from that chain, then you're like that person who's like, pumping away on the side, trying to manually do it and trying to move fast, but you're not going anywhere, and you're probably going in the wrong direction, right? So that's what's essential about the concept of sanad itself, is that connection to knowledge, that connection to scholarship. I cannot emphasize that enough. Ibn Mubarak, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, لَوْلَا الْإِسْنَادِ لَقَالَ مَنْ شَاءَ مَا شَاءَ. If it wasn't for isnad, if it wasn't for chain of transmission back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, anyone would say whatever they want. And that's exactly what we have today. In the name of Islam, the Quran, the Sunnah, everybody's saying whatever they want. So alhamdulillah, the fruit, the result of knowledge itself is khashya, like we talked about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. It is only the possessors of knowledge that truly fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that have submissiveness and obedience to Allah. That has to be the result. It's not so much I learn, so I have knowledge, so I can out-debate somebody. Well, I know more than you. I can talk more hadith, more ayat than you can, so I'm going to, impose my version of Islam on you. Why do we learn? We learn to have khashya and adab. Adab is manners, courtesy. وَضَعْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ فِي مَحَلِّهِ. Placing everything in its proper place is a definition of adab, and that should be the result of our seeking knowledge. The poet, he said, الْعِلْمْ خَشْيَ كُلَّ يُعْرَفْ بِذَاكَ أَهْلُ. That knowledge, all of it is khashya. And the people who have this are known by that. So, alhamdulillah, if you don't know yourself and your tradition and your religion and seek knowledge of this deen, then you will not know where you're going. You have to know history in order to know the future, because history repeats itself, and to know the tradition, to contextualize that in the American context that we live in, as they say, know history, know self. N-O history, N-O self. And then there's another one that follows and says, know history, know self. K-N-O-W, right? History, K-N-O-W, self, right? So if you know history, you'll know yourself, and you'll know your tradition, you know where you're going, and therefore you'll know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The goal of all of this, period, full stop, is to know Allah. Ma'rifah, gnosis. That is the goal of knowledge, action, khashya. It's not actually Jannah. That is the result of our obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a manifestation of His mercy and pleasure is that He enters us into Jannah. But the goal of knowledge and action is Allah. Pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's our Lord, our Creator, and we love Him and we worship Him, that's why. Some of the mystics of Islam, they'll say, "Man arafa nafsahu, arafa rabbah." Whoever knows themselves shall know their Lord. If you know who you are, the realities of yourself, then you will know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better. And nobody can know Allah completely. Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he says, "La ya'rif Allah illa Allah." Nobody knows the realities of Allah except Allah. The one who knows Allah the most is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But nobody knows Allah entirely, because He's absolute and eternal and unlimited and all-powerful and uncreated. And our knowledge is created. So what does that mean? Because it's a deep statement. If you know who you are, I know I'm weak. خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Allah says human beings were created weak. I know I'm temporal. I know I'm finite. I know I was created. I know I will die. I have an end. I know I'm powerless before Allah. I am nothing before Allah. If you know who you are, then you'll know better the realities of Allah, because Allah is not you. Allah is all-powerful. Allah is eternal. Allah is absolute. Allah is unlimited. Allah is all-knowledgeable. So He's not like us. So if you know the realities of yourself, you will know the better realities of Allah. There were two things the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ asked for an increase. Does anybody know them? Two things Rasulullah ﷺ asked for an increase. Do you know the first one? Clothes? Huh? Huh? Knowledge? Okay. Milk. Knowledge and milk, right? So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what's a sunnah, is when you're drinking milk or yogurt, right? You say, وَزِدْنَا مِنْهُ Allahumma barik lana fima atamtana warzuqna minhu wazidna minhu. You say, and Allah increase us in the milk. That's sunnah. And the second thing he asked is what Allah ordered him to ask, وَقُلْ رَبِّي زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. And say, Muhammad, O God, increase me in knowledge. This is the most knowledgeable man in all of creation, and yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him to seek more knowledge, to increase in knowledge. And so we asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also to increase us in knowledge. The scholars, they say, وَمَنْ قَالَ أَنَّهُ قَدْ عَلَمْ فَقَدْ جَهَلْ. Whoever says they now know is now ignorant. You say, I'm a scholar now. You now become ignorant. You now know nothing. Because the more you know nothing. The deeper you go into the deen, into knowledge, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know anything at all. When I went to go study abroad in Yemen, I thought I was Shaykh al-Akbar, the greatest Shaykh. I thought I knew everything, and I was telling everybody what's halal, haram, what's bid'ah and shirk, and what's right and wrong. Boy, I was so arrogant and ignorant. I didn't even know the alphabet in Arabic. I didn't even know how to read Quran properly. I didn't even know how to do my wudu correctly. I remember my first fiqh class, and the teacher was saying all these things in Arabic, and I studied a year. I studied a whole year of intensive Arabic, and I wasn't accustomed to the terminology, and the teacher said all these things because we're talking about the chapter of ghusl, what makes you have to do ghusl. So at the end of the class, in front of the whole class, I said, yeah, Shaykh, you said this word, this word, this word, this word. I have no idea what these words mean. We didn't study that in Arabic. And the class started to laugh. I'm like, what's everybody laughing at? I have to ask a question. The Shaykh got really close. He said, those are all the private parts. I'll talk to you about that after class. I was like, oh man, I don't even know that. Right? So that's the kind of arrogance and ignorance. And I realized that. And I realized there's people who know much more than I do. And so I had to seek knowledge from them. And it requires humility in seeking knowledge and realizing there are people who know more. So, as the scholars, they say, al-ilm yu'ti wa la ya'ti. Al-ilm yu'ta wa la ya'ti. Knowledge is sought, but it doesn't seek. If you want knowledge of deen, to practice that knowledge, you have to seek it. It's not going to seek you out. So it requires an effort. But the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says, مَنْ خَرَجَ بَيْتِهِ طَالِبًا لِلْعِلْمِ فَهُوَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ حَتَّى يَرْجِعُ. Whoever leaves their house seeking knowledge of this deen, then they are on the path of Allah until they return. So as you left your house today and you came to this conference, you are in the path of Allah right now, all the way until you get back home, because you're seeking knowledge. And those who do this, if you die in this gathering, which is possible, you die as a shaheed. You die as a martyr, you go straight to paradise, absolute forgiveness, no questioning or reckoning on the day of judgment, pass the hellfire, and you get to intercede on behalf of 70 members of your family. If you die here, because you're seeking knowledge. Did you know that every step you took to this gathering, to seek knowledge for Allah's sake, the angels spread their wings beneath your feet? This is according to Sahih Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Every step there's an angel spreading its wing below your feet, because you're seeking deen, knowledge of deen. That's a fakhr. That's something to be proud of in a good Islamic way. They also say, لو أعطيت كلك للعلم يعطيك بعده. If you give all yourself to knowledge, it'll only give you a part of it. It will never give you all of yourself. So our ignorance is greater than our knowledge. That has to be something we understand. Imam Ata'illah, he says in his hikam, he says, Ya ilahi, inni jahilun fi jahli fi kif la akun jahilun fi ilmi. He says, oh my Lord, I am ignorant in my ignorance. My ignorance is greater than my knowledge. So how can I not be ignorant in my knowledge? So in other words, what I don't know is more than what I do know. All the people of knowledge
equal with those who are not? No, they're not. So sometimes in our culture and society we think everything and everybody's equal, right? And equal doesn't mean same. Right? You can be equal and different. There's justice between different peoples and different levels. And the closest is only known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because only Allah knows what's in the hearts of men and women. He says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, the most noble of all of you is the most pious, the most righteous. Those who have the most taqwa, which is avoiding the prohibitions of Allah and obeying His commandments. That's the definition by Imam Ghazali of taqwa. That's only known to Allah. But outwardly, is everybody the same? You can be equal before Allah, sure. Everyone's equal before Allah. But is everybody treated the same outwardly? No, they're not. There's a difference between the scholars and the non-scholars. And who said? Allah said in the Quran. He says, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Say, are they equal? Say, Muhammad, are they equal? Those who know and those who do not know. Those who know what? Medicine? You're doctor, mashallah. Mashallah, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer. Mashallah, computer programmer, you make a lot of money. You work at Microsoft and Boeing and Zillow and Google. Allah is talking about what kind of knowledge here? Not knowledge of medical equipment or hard drives or law, Western law. Talking about what kind of knowledge here? Sacred knowledge of the deen. Because there's no greater knowledge than the knowledge that is attached to Allah and His Messenger ﷺ, because Allah is the greatest in all existence and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the greatest in all creation. So no knowledge is greater than the knowledge of them and their deen and their Quran and their Sunnah. So that is superior, and we have to acknowledge it, and that is humble. When I played football for University of Washington, we won the Rose Bowl in 2001. And I was a starting nose tackle. I was destined for the NFL. I was going to leave early my junior year. And I thought I was on top of the world. Man, I'm going to make millions of dollars, fame, glory. I'm going to be on TV. Everybody's going to love me. You're arrogant and ignorant. And then I'm like, well, these scholars, they don't know anything. And then I studied with them. And I'm like, oh, man. Boy, I had some diseases I had to remove. Because arrogance is a disease. It's a major sin. The Prophet Muhammad says in Sahih Bukhari, لا يدخل الجنة من كان في قلبه مثقال ذرة من كبر. Nobody will enter paradise who has an atom's weight of arrogance in their heart. Sometimes we focus so much on the outward sins, we neglect the inward ones. And that's something that requires knowledge to remove. How else are you going to know what you have and what you don't have? They say the poorest person, the miskeen, not financially, the poorest person is the one who doesn't even know their diseases. They don't even know their sicknesses. And they just walk around daydreaming. Right? As Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajhu, he says, النَّاسُ نِيَامُ وَإِذَا مَاتُوا انْتَبَهُ. People are sleepwalking, and when they die, they wake up. That's when they realize the reality. Instead, we think this is the reality, this is our abode, and it's going to all stay here. But that's not the legacy we want to leave. So, Allah says they're not equal. He says, I'd say the equal people of knowledge, those who know and those who do not know. It's a rhetorical question. No, they're not equal. And if you do not know, be humble enough to say, I don't know. You know, Imam Zuhri, Imam Malik's teacher, he said, قَوْلُكَ لَا أَدْرِي نِصُّ الْعِلْمِ. For you to say, I don't know, is half of knowledge. That's half of your knowledge right there. Because you will seek the other half. Let me tell you a big secret. 7 years of studying abroad and spending a lot of my life studying. Let me tell you a big secret. Half of knowledge is what you know here. The other half is knowing where to look, who to ask. That's the other 50%. And who tells us to ask when we don't know? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran. He says, فَاسْأَلْ أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you yourself do not know. And be humble enough to say like Imam Zuhri said, لَا أَدْرِي نِفْسُ الْعِلْمِ. I don't know is half of knowledge. And the scholars debate, is it better to say لَا أَدْرِي or Allahu A'lam? Right? People say Allahu A'lam, Allah knows best. Which is better? They say for you to say, La adri is better than to say Allahu A'lam, because everybody knows Allah knows best, but not everybody knows you don't know, and it's good for you to say, I don't know. And then that will cause you to go seek knowledge and ask the people of knowledge, and that's what Allah tells us as a directive in the Quran. It's a fi'l amr, which is a command. Ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. So when we understand that all people have specializations, right? So it's not like, ask the Shaykh about medical surgery. All right. Ask him about, Western legal systems. All right. Okay. We have to respect the specializations of specialists and what they do. And the Shaykh is not the lawyer or doctor, and the doctor and lawyer is not the Shaykh. Right. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ beautifully says this. He says, "Rahimallah Imran, qadr a'rafa qadr nafsi." Allah has mercy upon the one that knows the measure of themselves. You know where you end and other people begin. You know your extent. That is so important. So when somebody comes to me and says, Shaykh, I have some health problems, some pain in my chest, I don't say, well, let me look at it and diagnose you, and then I'll give you a prescription, and you might need surgery. Are you a doctor? You went through the accreditation process, you went through the residency, you're legally certified, you've practiced, you have experience, you've done surgery before. No, I'm just a local imam. Thank you, Shaykh, just make dua for me. Logically, right? Well, the opposite is true. If you have a question in religion, you don't go to a doctor's shop and say, hey, doctor, I have a fatwa I'm looking at. I'm a medical doctor, right? Why would he be able to give you that fatwa or give you that legal opinion if he's only a doctor? And similarly, respecting each other's. And if it was reversed, obviously we know logically that we would go to the specialist and what they specialize in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He also says in the Quran, يَرْفَعَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah raises amongst the believers those who have been given knowledge. Notice, not that you have knowledge, you've been given knowledge by Allah. He raises those people up in higher degrees and higher stations. This is an ayah in the Quran. So they are in higher levels. If they seek knowledge and act upon their knowledge, sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Sahaba, how did they seek knowledge in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? They were sitting in front of him as if birds were perched on their heads. That's how they were. Can you imagine a bird perched on your head? It has chicks and eggs. Yeah, you have to be silent and still and attentive in order for them to stay in your head. In Yemen, they would tell the students, sit in front of your teacher as if you're going to eat him. Only they wouldn't tell me that because they thought I'd take it literally. It's like, he's a bit bigger than all of us. I was the biggest guy in the school, right? So they're like, yeah, he's going to really eat you, so be careful. Right? So you should, as if you're going to consume them, all the knowledge and everything, just absorb everything like a sponge. These are the sincere, true students of knowledge. So these are the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. I want to give you an example of one of the great scholars in Islam. There are many examples. Imam Shafi rahimahullah ta'ala he was a founder of the Shafi madhab, and there are 4 great madhabs, and they're all right, they're all correct, they're all sound, and differences amongst the scholars is a mercy. That's what the scholars tell us. So Imam Shafi himself, when did he memorize the Quran? He was 7 years old when he memorized the Quran. Right? And so he would do that. He was attentive in the class of Imam Malik. That's his first teacher. So Imam Shafi actually grew up Maliki, and then he becomes Shafi, right? He develops his own madhab later, his school of thought. And so when he would sit in front of Imam Malik, he would write on his hand because he was so poor. He couldn't afford paper or even pen. Sometimes he would write on bones, sometimes on leaves, leather. So he'd write on his own hand, and Imam Malik said, "What are you doing?" He said, "No, I'm writing your lesson," because he had a photographic memory. And Imam Malik says, "What did I say?" He said, well, your whole lesson, he said, you said this, you said that, and verbatim, he recited it back to Imam Malik. And Imam Malik said, okay, ittaqillah, fear Allah. All right, you can continue doing that, but fear Allah. Right? So that was Imam Shafi. He wrote this, and he was a half of that, 7 years old. He was a mufti at the age of 14. And who gave him the ifta? It was Imam Malik. He memorized the book Muwatta, which is one of the great first hadith books. And Imam Malik said, you're now qualified to be a mufti at age 14. He'd recite the Quran 1 time a day. Outside Ramadan, and 2 times a day inside Ramadan, once in the morning and once at the night, and he dies at the age of 54. He died young. And you have other examples, like Imam ibn Hanbal. He memorized over 1 million hadiths, alf hadith, with the chain of transmission. Can you imagine that? You say, I know a couple hadith in Arabic. I'm Shaykh. No, Imam ibn Hanbal, right? 1 million hadith with all the chain of transmissions. And someday he would teach his son 100,000 hadith. And his son memorized them all. And he said, great, alhamdulillah, you memorized them? Those are all the fabricated ones. Now you know what to look out for. Right? It's not even the, he said, those are the bad ones. Don't, yeah, but good you know them. He thought he was memorizing the right ones, right? So, alhamdulillah, these are the real scholars. Imam Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he is recorded to recite the Quran 6 to 8 times a day. Imam Nawawi rahimahullah dies at the age of 45 because he was so consumed and obsessed with seeking knowledge and teaching. He never got married, he never had kids, he lived in a school and dies at 45. In fact, there's one story which is a miracle of Imam Nawawi. And we believe as Muslims a miracle. Imam Nawawi, he was trying to study and read, and his oil on his lamp went out, and so he actually used his finger with light at the tip, and he would use it to read his book that he was reading. That's a miracle. I mean, this is pre-ET. This is before come home, E.T. come home, right? And he would do that. And we have countless examples of our great scholars. I'll tell you something that I witnessed in my life. I remember when I was in Yemen studying, and there was a 16-year-old kid from India. He's not from the West, but he's straight from India to Yemen. And he was in my halaqah for, I think, a fiqh class. And that morning, his mother died. Allah yarhamuha. Have mercy on her and enter in Jannah. And I'm like, man, let's give this brother some time, let him mourn. We gave condolences. We had another class in the afternoon, and I sat down the halaqah, and he sits right next to me with all his books and papers. I said, Ya akhi, yani, your mother just died this morning. Yani, take some time to grieve. Make some dua, read some Quran, take a break. He said, my mother sent me here for this, and if she was alive today, she would want me to continue seeking knowledge. That's ikhlas. That's dedication to the cause. That is a commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seeking knowledge of the deen. I witnessed in Yemen a brother who had one leg, no crutches, one leg, hopping around from halaqah to halaqah. He prayed all 20 rak'at that was 2 hours long in the nights of Ramadan on one leg. What excuse do we have? I'm standing next to this brother like, oh, my legs are tired, it feels like jello, what's the Shaykh saying, I don't even know, I'm hungry. And this guy had one leg, ruku', sujood, qiyam. I'm like, oh man, I'm a fool. There's nothing I can speak about. How can I not show up to my classes when he's hopping around? He's going upstairs, downstairs, everything. That's the dedication. One of my teachers, Habib Omar bin Hafidhullah Ta'ala, when he was younger, and he would study and read, and he would start to get tired. And so what he would do is he would sit on a wall on the roof and read his books, so that if he started to fall asleep, he would fall off the edge, so he'd catch himself and continue reading. And actually, one time he did fall off. He was so exhausted, he actually fell off, landed on some water area, and he, alhamdulillah, came up fine with no harm. And it's actually after that they started to call him Habib. Because it was a miracle. He actually fell from the second story and just got up with no problem. Let me tell you a real story in sociology. They study this case. A man, he actually fell from the 7th floor of a building on concrete. And then he actually dusted himself off, no harm. 7 stories, straight on concrete. No harm, gets off, dusts himself off. This shows you don't know when your time is. He says, let's go celebrate, we'll get a beer at the store. He crosses the street, bam, gets hit by a car and dies. SubhanAllah. That could be at any moment, any time. So take advantage of your life before it goes. Our Prophet Muhammad says, take advantage of your life before death, your health before sickness, and what? Your youth before you get older. So, alhamdulillah, I want to talk about some hadith. And the Prophet Muhammad he says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما يريد الله بخيرا يفقهه في الدين. Whoever Allah wants good for the person, they give them fiqh in the deen. Fiqh can mean understanding, it can mean jurisprudence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you understanding if He wants good for you. And He says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. Seeking knowledge is an obligation, it's a duty upon all Muslims. We know in our communities, secular sciences are beneficial. It's a fard kifaya, it's a communal obligation. If in our communities we do not have a doctor or a lawyer or somebody who can help, then this is actually a sin for the entire community. But if a number suffices, then the sin falls from everyone. However, seeking knowledge of personal fard ayn, personal obligations, is itself a personal obligation for all of us to know, because knowledge preserves actions. In other words, if somebody asks you, how do you do your wudu? How do you pray? The way you know is because you yourself have knowledge of how to do your wudu, and then you do your wudu. And so if somebody asks you, then you can show them because you do this every day, because you pray every day. So action preserves knowledge and allows you to teach it to those who come after. And that's the legacy you and I need to leave. So this is the hadith, and obviously we know that these sciences are important. Of course, today we've misplaced this emphasis. We say to our youth, the most important thing is you get straight A's. Not if they pray all 5 prayers on time. Not if they pray Fajr, right? You get good grades. Alhamdulillah, that's the most important thing. We'll say to them what? You have to build your resume. You need to get a good career, a good job, and then you can get a house and a car. And then after that, after your double PhD, you can get married. So by the time they're 4 years old, they can finally get married. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. And so we put such emphasis on their secular studies and such emphasis on college and school and grades and resume building and getting a job. What kind of emphasis have we placed in their religion? And if we teach our kids at a young age to love and to focus on and to be attached to the dunya, then don't be surprised when they get older and they go to college and they're away from you and they're amongst people who are around 4 years of their age that they do something crazy and stupid. And that's the phone call I get when my son or my daughter has gone crazy and they're doing all this stuff. What should we do? They're not praying, or they're not this, or they're doing that. They're in the clubs, they're drinking, they're doing drugs, they're not praying, They have a boyfriend, they have a girlfriend. What age were they praying at? Oh, we never taught them. Well, 17 we try to tell them. Tarbiyah, it starts as a young child. In fact, it starts before that. You got to plant the seed, you got to water it, take care of it, and watch it grow. That's how it works, right? The scholars, they say that the child is like dough in front of your hands. You can mold it however you want. As soon as you bake that dough, khalas, it's too late. Just like that tree, when that tree grows up, if you don't take care of it, maybe put the stick there, water it, fertilize it, it may grow crooked. And when it grows crooked, it's too hard to pull back. You got to make sure it grows straight. That's the key. So we have to teach our kids Islam and place emphasis on that and not just on their secular sciences. It's funny how we value things in this society. Somebody, when I'm a discussion on a plane with a non-Muslim, sometimes even a Muslim, they'll say to me, for example, what did you study? What do you do? And I'll say, alhamdulillah, I studied in Yemen for 7 years, Arabic and Islamic studies. And they're like, oh, mashallah, mashallah. Oh, that's wonderful. Great. And then they're like, yeah, but tell me what you really studied. What I really studied? Yeah, something you can fall back on. You got a degree or something? Yeah, okay, alhamdulillah, I got a bachelor's of arts in psychology. Oh, that's great, wonderful, mashallah. Great job. Great job. Now you can, have a future. Did you do anything else? Like in college? Alhamdulillah, we won the Rose Bowl, and I used to start for the Husky. Oh, mashallah, Allahu Akbar, that's great, wonderful. Can I get your autograph? That's the last thing I'm concerned about. Yes, I don't value that near as much as studying abroad and spending time with the shuyukh and learning my deen. I would not exchange 1 minute in the Rose Bowl itself, or my ring or my watch and all that, I wouldn't exchange any of it for just a moment of time sitting in front of the scholars. I would give my Rose Bowl ring, my Rose Bowl watch, the whole shabam. I give it all to sit in front of the shuyukh for 2 minutes and take knowledge. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he says about Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, لولا جالسين مع الصادق ما فهمت الدين. If it wasn't for 2 gatherings I had with Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, I wouldn't have understood the religion. And these Imams had respect for one another. Imam Shafi, he says about Imam Malik, إِذَا ذُكِرَ الْعُلَمَاء فَالْمَالِكْ نَجْمُهُم. That if the scholars are mentioned, Malik is the star. They loved each other, they respected each other. We have to honor that. And we cannot dispute, and we can disagree, but you agree to disagree in peace and harmony and coexistence. You don't have to fight each other because of differences of opinion. We need to get over this. This is the old school divide and conquer method that's worked in the Ummah for hundreds of years. If you see Imam Shafi in the adab he had with Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, one, al-fiqh ya'alun ala Abu Hanifa. Fiqh is a dependent, it's a child of Abu Hanifa. And when he went to go visit his mosque in Iraq, he didn't say the Bismillah aloud, which is wajib in the Shafi method, and he didn't do the qanut of Fajr. And they asked him, Ya Imam, have you changed your madhab? He said, no, it's out of respect for the man in that grave, Imam Abu Hanifa, because this was his masjid. So he left that out just for our respect out of him. That's the kind of love they had. Imam ibn Hanbal, his teacher was Imam Shafi. These are all teachers and students of each other. And Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik were contemporaries. Imam ibn Hanbal got sick. Imam Shafi went to visit Imam ibn Hanbal. And as he went to go visit him, he got sick because he saw his Habib sick. And so Imam ibn Hanbal was cured because his Habib, his beloved, came and visited him. So Imam Shafi gets sick, comes back home, and then Imam Hanbal gets cured, and he comes and visits Imam Shafi, and he gets healed. Because they loved each other. And that's what we have to have today amongst our ummah. Love, differences, diversity, so forth. And be more inclusive. So alhamdulillah, these are some of the things about seeking knowledge that I wanted to talk about. And also I wanted to talk about a couple more hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam about some of the fadl, the merits of seeking knowledge itself. 1 minute. Okay. In closing, alhamdulillah, good fair warning, huh? One time I was at a conference and somebody said, 12, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute. You know what the next sign was? Overtime. And you telling a football player overtime. I'm like, oh, we're going overtime. This is fifth quarter, let's go. So alhamdulillah. So we'll wrap it up. I just want to talk very briefly about some hadith about seeking knowledge. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "Ballighu anni walau ayah," convey from me, and even if it's a word or even if it's a verse. And so this is something that we need today, inshallah. So whatever you know, whatever you learn, go and convey that knowledge. Go teach that knowledge. Give dawah. Invite people to Islam. Convey from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And even if you know one verse, do you know Qul Huwallahu Ahad? Do you know the Fatiha? These are many verses. Even Thad in the Quran is a verse. So you can even tell somebody that. And then inshallah this will change people's lives. And these are real things. And I'll close with just a short story, alhamdulillah, about seeking knowledge itself and how important it is and some of the challenges that one faces in it. Alhamdulillah, I remember when I studied abroad for a period of time, it was very challenging because there's all these obstacles and you're going to have to, Allah's going to test your sincerity and how much you want to learn and how much you want to practice and how much you want to teach others, inshallah. So I remember when I would sit and I studied maybe 10 halaqat a day and I was rigorous, intense studies. And alhamdulillah, I actually had a prolapse disc in my back from actually studying and sitting too much. And I actually did that in Taraweeh in Ramadan. And one of the things was I got, kind of worried and depressed, like, oh man, I was out for almost a year. It took me 3 months just to walk again and a year to get somewhat recovered. But I remember one of my teachers, he said something to me because I was not coming to the halaqas for a period of time. And so one of my teachers, he said to me, he said, no, come, we'll put a chair and you can have pillows. I'm like, Shaykh, next to you? He said, yeah, put a chair, put a pillow. So, and he sits on the floor, right? And, in front of me. And he said, yeah, no. And I said, but Shaykh, my back and it's not healed yet and it's still early. And he said, you know what? Come to the halaqah with the niyyah of shifat. Come to the halaqah with the intention of Allah curing you and healing you, and inshallah He will. So I came with the pillows. I looked like a fool. I had my thing, my cane, chair, pillows in the middle of this musalla. Everybody's on the floor, and I'm, sitting on the throne, And then, alhamdulillah, I noticed a significant difference in my healing process because of the intention of seeking knowledge with the niyyah of shifat, of curing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah give us tawfiq, Allah give us shifat, Allah give us unity, Allah give us love and respect, Allah give us the ability to agree to disagree about differences of opinion between the scholars, which are a mercy. May Allah give us sanad, a chain of transmission back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to leave a legacy for ourselves, for our youth, for our families, for our communities, for our entire ummah, for the world, Muslims and non-Muslims. You have to ask yourself a very critical question. What legacy are you leaving behind when you are no longer here? And I'm not talking about, just you, the person next to you. I wonder what you're doing. What are you? What are you leaving behind when you're no longer here for this community, for the ummah at large, for the Muslim and non-Muslims, for this country, for your family, for your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren? What are you leaving behind? What tradition of knowledge? What are you inheriting? What are you seeking? And what are you passing on? What are you teaching and conveying to the generations that come after you? These are very important questions. May Allah give us tawfiq in knowledge. May Allah give us tawfiq in practice. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us ikhlas and sidq. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purify us and our hearts and our souls. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us do this for sincerely for His sake. And inshallah, we encourage everybody to come to the Mihraab classes. There's no excuse. We have a class every single Sunday at 1:45 at MAPS. We have a class Sunday after Maghrib in ICOE. We have a class every Thursday after Maghrib in ICOR. We have a class 4:30 on Thursdays to 4:30 to 5:30 at University of Washington and Savory Hall, room 156. These are classes Mihraab provides for free, and you're all invited and encouraged to come to seek the deen and the knowledge thereof, and inshallah to pass it on. Jazakumullah khair, barakallahu feekum, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.